Black Lives Matter goes hysterical as Antifa radicals set themselves on fire. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the latest antics coming from the far left over the weekend, why it's demonstrating that they know they're losing support across the nation, and why we can expect such heightened hysterics to only erode their support all the more. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you as always. As this is your first time here at this channel, I post 2 videos a day analyzing current events, analyze some super awesome conservative trends so that you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. It'd be an absolute privilege to have you as a regular part of this channel, where each and every day we together celebrate the inevitable collapse of left-wing globalism and the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. But first, before we do anything else, make sure to click on the link below and head on over to my special website for my Patriot food supply. As we saw with the whole pandemic insanity, we cannot wait for an emergency to happen before we respond to one. And no one makes preparing for an emergency more ridiculously easy and affordable than My Patriot Supply. They're good friends of this channel, and they're simply the best, gang. Their food kits last up to 25 years in storage. They include breakfast, lunches, and dinners. And best of all, they've got a guarantee policy that's going to absolutely knock your socks off. And if you act now, you can save $100 off a full 4-week emergency food supply when you click on the link below to my special website. You heard that right, $100 off, so don't wait. I've got my food supply. Make sure you get yours. Click on that link below or go to preparewithsteve.com and save $100 off your very own 4-week emergency food supply today. All right, let's dive right in here. This weekend seemed to show what appears to be a growing frustration among BLM agitators, Antifa radicals. It's amounting to what I think is the beginning of the far left's jumping the shark period, right? Are you familiar with that term, jumping the shark? It's a phrase that comes from the once hit TV show Happy Days, where a once popular show, or in this case now a popular movement, begins to wane in its popularity. And sensing that the population is losing interest, the creators decide to do something absurd, so silly, so over-the-top ridiculous, that its attempt to generate publicity only serves to highlight how irrelevant the show, or in this case, the movement, has become. And it appears that BLM is hitting that point. Now, we talked about this on one of last week's videos, but BLM support is, in fact, imploding. According to Politico, favorability for BLM has dropped 9 points in just the last couple of weeks alone. In the swing state of Wisconsin, where we've seen the whole chaos in Kenosha, support for BLM has dropped 13 points. The website Civics tracks opinion trends over the course of weeks and months. We've been watching them. And what we're finding is that opposition against BLM has surged by over 10 points over the last several weeks to 38%. And support has dropped from a high of 53% to now its current 50%. And look at this. This is a graph of white support and opposition towards BLM. And you can clearly see that a plurality of whites oppose Black Lives Matter, 46%, which has been steadily going up. And if you factor in those who don't care, who basically don't give a rip about BLM, that number surges to 60%. So 60% of whites either oppose or don't give a heck about BLM. So that's a pretty astonishing number. But again, we've done this before, but you could break that down even more to white males. 54% oppose BLM. Nearly 70% of white males either oppose BLM or don't give a crap about it. Only 33% of white males support this BLM movement. So what's growing increasingly clear is that BLM has indeed exhausted itself. It's gone as far as it's going to be able to go. And the members of the movement, the activists, the agitators, whatever you want to call them, they are beginning to realize this. They're beginning to realize their days of influence have waned, right? And as a result, you're seeing a growing hysteria. Over the weekend, the Gateway Pundit reported on a group of BLM radicals harassing elderly people who were dining outdoors in the city of Pittsburgh. They approached the outdoor cafe and started breaking glasses and plates. One fellow could be seen and heard yelling at an elderly couple, F white people who built this racist system, and gives them the finger, and as the rest of the BLM mob taunts them. And then you can see a black woman walk up to their table. She has a t-shirt that says, "Nazi lives don't matter." And she walks up to this elderly couple and grabbed a drink from their table and started to drink out of it. And again, as the Gateway pundit points out, so much for caring about COVID-19, right? And of course, this is your typical CNN designated peaceful protest, right? Nothing to see here. Now, it should be noted that that t-shirt that said Nazi lives don't matter, that appears to have been inspired by the killing of Jay Bishop, a Patriot Prayer supporter who was gunned down in the streets of Portland by the Antifa radical Michael Raynal. And after news of the killing made its way through the ranks of the rioters in Portland, one BLM activist could be heard declaring to the crowd through her blowhorn, quote, "I just got word that the person who died was a Patriot Prayer Trump person. He was an effing Nazi. Our community held its own and we took out the trash. I'm not going to shed any tears over a Nazi." So this is pretty militant stuff, and it's now becoming a bit of a slogan, a very violent one at that, we're seeing on t-shirts. Now, this act of mob swarming restaurants and harassing diners with their tantrums appears to be a pattern. We saw the same thing in Denver. Approximately 75 rioters entered Union Station to scream at people who were dining there. They demanded that they all leave their tables and demonstrate on the streets with them, or else they're just a bunch of racists, right? Silence is compliance, after all. Who they think they're convincing with this stuff, I have no idea. In Dallas, Texas, a BLM mob disrupted a #walkaway rally. They stormed the stage and got into an altercation with security. And in Kentucky, at the world-famous Kentucky Derby, hundreds of armed militia groups confronted BLM and Antifa agitators in downtown Louisville. And they got pretty intense when the militant black militia known as NFAC showed up as well, with the intent of stopping the Derby from taking place. They failed in that endeavor. The Derby took place as scheduled. Now, on the Antifa side of things, you had a major fail that's being widely publicized, and this is actually coming from the Daily Wire. On Saturday night, a group of Antifa radicals were rioting in southeast Portland. I know, surprise, surprise. But when one of them threw a Molotov cocktail in the middle of the street, which in turn ended up setting another rioter on fire. And so you have this bizarre scene where a whole, group of Antifa agitators stop rioting and try to basically prevent this guy from being engulfed by flames. And irony of ironies, the fire wasn't finally stamped out until a policeman came over and did so. So another massive fail on the part of Antifa, and very symbolic of what we're seeing. A new study just came out showing that BLM demonstrations and riots took place in 48 of the 50 largest cities in the nation. And in the end, who are they hurting? Right? Who are these demonstrators and rioters hurting in the end? Are small and big businesses fleeing from the exurbs? Are people moving into cities en masse? Or is everyone leaving? Are we seeing a massive exodus? They're only destroying themselves, and their continued and increasing hysteria will only serve to exacerbate the situation. So what on earth is going on here? Why are BLM and Antifa radicals only ultimately hysterically destroying themselves? Before we answer that, we've got something for you podcast fans out there. We recently launched our brand new Turley Talks podcast, which tens of thousands of you have been downloading, upwards of 100,000 as I understand it. I can't thank you enough for that. And we are excited to share with you that we are now the 23rd most downloaded podcast for daily news on Apple Podcasts. We've jumped 20 slots just in the last couple of weeks. It's really awesome. It's amazing. We have you to thank. We were in the top 40. Now we're almost in the top 20. But you can actually help us become the #1 conservative news and commentary podcast by simply clicking on the link below in the pinned comments section and signing up to download our new podcast. Twice a day, every day, you can take Turley Talks anywhere you go. So make sure to click on that link below and sign up for our Turley Talks podcast. And let's together make it to #1. All right. So what's going on with all of this self-destructive behavior that we're seeing in our nation's cities? If we take a step back, I think what's happening here is actually nothing more than the latest development of what we commonly refer to as Trump derangement syndrome, right? TDS. And I'm not being silly. I'm being very serious here. Believe it or not, cultural anthropologists have long studied the phenomenon known as hysteria or mass hysteria in various cultures. And what they found is that mass hysteria is a kind of shared psychotic behavior that often involves some kind of assault either social, such as publicly harassing people like we're seeing in the restaurants and the like, or it can actually turn physically violent, where people are actually assaulted physically or killed, like we saw recently in Portland. Now, what's interesting to me in all of this, okay, and I think this is key, the absolute key to understanding what's going on here. What's so interesting is that in many cultures, such erratic behavior is often chalked up to spiritual and malignant attack. In other words, the epidemic of hysteria is seen not so much as the fault of the perpetrators, but rather the fault of malignant forces outside of their control. Right? So in effect, we are talking about the phenomenon of possession here. These hysterical people are being possessed through no fault of their own. And again, what's so interesting here is that because they're under spiritual attack, hysterical people are not blamed for their hysteria. In fact, they're often defended in the midst of their hysteria because their symptoms are seen as involuntary. They're acting that way not because they chose to or want to. They're acting that way because they've been provoked. They've been forced into this by these malevolent spirits. That's how cultural anthropologists understand mass hysteria. And so, I think we're seeing something similar here, albeit in a more secular sense, especially when it comes to the ways in which the mainstream Marxist media so sympathetically applauds these acts of mass hysteria. The reason our political media elite will not denounce these blatantly destructive and socially imbecilic behaviors is because they see such behaviors provoked by the far more malevolent forces of racism and bigotry that have been unleashed upon our nation by Donald Trump and the mass sea of deplorables that put him into office. These are the malevolent spirits that are possessing these protesters. And so it's not their fault. They're evidencing the very kind of behavior that we can expect to see whenever one is being threatened by outside forces rightly deemed to be evil and depraved and malicious. Now, of course, the question is whether the majority of voters buy that. I do not think so. Again, I think the days of BLM are waning. Their support is indeed imploding, which means that we can expect their hysterics to get even more hysterical in the not-so-distant future. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. And you will definitely want to check out my latest video. I just uploaded it on the confessed killer of a Patriot Prayer supporter getting shot and killed by police, all as Antifa thugs are arrested across the nation. You're not going to want to miss that one. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.